And welcome, Jason Rathe.
You look cute.
All right, well, thanks for coming. I'm Jason Rathe from Field Outdoor Spaces landscape company. We're a small, called Small Urban and Natural Landscape Company in Minneapolis. My talk is on small yards, and that's really what we've always done. We started 12 years ago, and our first thought was always, well, what isn't being done out there? As you look at, if you put in landscaping Minneapolis or something like that, what always comes up is the biggest projects, the biggest houses. And I just did this actually, I'm going to Texas, and I was kind of looking for some, a couple cool companies to maybe talk with. And it's the same thing kind of in every industry segment, is these big places. And what we really thought is, well, that can't be the only, people out there that are doing landscaping. It probably isn't even the major market for it. That we're not going to put any big places on there. We're just going to have small, but really unique, types of places. That's been really successful for us. That was our original idea, and we're also both, my partner and I were both urban people, and so it made a lot of sense. But it's been really successful because now when people come to us, they see the small, they see maybe the urban, and they automatically feel this kind of deep engagement to it. It's not just kind of like, oh, I want landscaping. And so it's been really good for us is that if they come in and they're like, oh, I'm small, I'm urban, we have this natural connection that when we meet the first meeting, it's already kind of started. We're not competing against other people, well, I just need a patio. And so it's been really good for, and I really think that for our company, sometimes people ask us, well, are you going to kind of expand out into, other things? And the reality is we have a lot more growth being small and being even more so that way and cutting out the other things. And so small landscapes is a really core part of what we do. And there's a lot of, things in my life too that experiences that I've had that I kind of tie into that really make that kind of a passion as well. So at this point, kind of ask people, like, what do you think about when you think about small landscapes worldwide? Like, what are some of the cultures that have small landscapes? What are some of the key words that you think of? And people kind of say, one of the big ones right away is like Japan. Like Japan, think about, those small little landscapes. And Japan certainly has this history of these, small spaces, and it's definitely one of these things that we talk about with clients a lot. It's one of those things that people automatically have a feeling about. And I think when, as designers, and we're thinking about selling things and thinking about creating things for people, we're always trying to come up with those words or those phrases that both get us to connect on what we're talking about, but also create these wells of emotion. And so I think that Japanese gardens, especially kind of serene, peaceful, and most of these Japanese gardens are courtyards, and so that's probably the word that I use the most. I don't think I ever go on a meeting without saying the word courtyard. I think courtyard just kind of has this, oh, I'm in my little space. And the gardens that we work on, especially backyards, are largely courtyards. They're going to be a house, garage, alley, and then fence backyard, and so it's going to be kind of this little area, and that's that's kind of the courtyard thing. Is walking in, and kind of the birds are tweeting, and it feels peaceful. One thing about Japanese gardens that we see and that we kind of connect to is that a lot of them are in temples, and how they're organized is that the gardens are kind of in these areas, and there's walkways outside of the temple, and they walk around, and they might walk over the garden, but the gardens are always set up to be viewed from specific spots. And so it might be that they're inside and they open up the screen doors and they look out from one direction specifically at that garden. And then the other place is a lot of times they're sitting on the edge of the walkway looking at it, because a lot of them are contemplative gardens, and so you sit there and you just kind of let your mind kind of think of things as you're looking at it. And I think that's important to think about in small yard design, is that viewing from inside is one of the most important things. It's probably the experience that is the experience that we experience the most is, if we're really lucky, if we have a window in the kitchen sink, because you're sitting there washing dishes and you can look out. And so that should be a really key viewpoint that you think about that garden. There's also kind of the back door, there's also the walking in from the garage. I open the door, what's that experience? What are those viewpoints? As I'm walking through the house, how am I viewing it? Each window that I go by, as I look out, what do I see? So I think that's one thing to always keep in mind. A couple other things is to kind of like working on, small spaces. What are some of the experiences, some of the things we can think about? One is Moorish gardens, which is kind of a word maybe not a lot of people have heard about, but in Spain and parts of Mediterranean, these are ancient gardens. And if you bought a book on courtyards, probably the first thing that you're going to come up. These are ones that have the little fountain in the front. Think about what is the show where they ride in the carpets.
Aladdin?
Aladdin, yes, thank you, Aladdin. I think about Aladdin, the courtyard in in the middle. Also very peaceful. Also going to be a lot of spaces that you tie that architecture to. That a lot of those are going to have tile floors around the pool, and then the tile's going to carry up into the architecture, really nice, tied together. And the other thing is that this is going to be a very formal arrangement of the space. It's going to have a very strong axis with the fountain in the middle, whereas Japanese gardens are going to be a lot more informal. It's going to be more of a natural flow. So as you think about formal spaces, so many people now are liking more kind of modern contemporary with more straight lines, and so this type of garden can have some inspiration around that more formal arrangement. Other gardens, small garden types, this one probably isn't kind of an iconic type, but for me, I kind of tie to it. It'd be like a Greek garden that you go out on, from this. I was staying in Santorini with my wife. She wasn't my wife at that time, we had just met. But we stayed in a cave house on Santorini in the town of Ia. And we had so the cave house and then this patio that goes out. And then you're looking out to the caldera, the water area. And we just sat there for 3 days, basically. You're inside and it's kind of cool. And then you just go out, especially in the evening where the sun's coming down. It's really hot there. And you just have the wine and the little bit of feta and tomatoes, and just sit out there and put your feet up. And so as I think about what I want to give to my clients, because I really think that the design process to me should be, they come to me for what I can give them. I'm giving them from my experience, but I really hope that they can experience. And so that was one experience for me, that just think about, okay, life's crazy. Okay, imagine myself back there. And then a couple others. Holland, also probably not a culture we think tons about all the time, but I biked through Europe when I was just came out of college and ended up in Amsterdam. And there happened to be this garden tour of courtyard gardens, kind of guided, self-guided. And I just remember, walking through and this heavy door, open the door, it was loud. You might not know, but Amsterdam, I think consistently has been the second or third most heavily populated country in the world. And so, historically, they've always had to deal with, how do I find peace in an area that has tons and tons of people? And so I think small gardens, and everything there is going to be small too because of that population. And so I think they're a really interesting culture to think about, how do you get the most out of small spaces. So open this door, loud, the street, and then it closes behind me, and all there is this kind of quiet, and the birds are chirping. This cat, kind of runs behind the bikes. So that again is another kind of really, for me, my personal experience is powerful. Thought of just how small spaces can bring us that kind of peace. The other thing that's interesting, I think, there are two probably things that are interesting about Amsterdam and Holland and what it has to do with small gardens is that ecologically, Holland is really far ahead of most of the world because they live in this place that's underwater and they have to deal with the fact they have tons of people in a space that's kind of underwater. And so ecologically, they have just so many things that they're doing that we're just kind of on the edge of even thinking about. The other thing is that in these spaces, you might go into this courtyard space. It's actually surrounded by 5 buildings that are owned by totally different people. And so it's a little different there is, well, who owns that courtyard space? Well, it's kind of a collective space. It's kind of a public space. And that's something we really like working on. For a lot of our clients when we work in their front yards, they're really wanting that space to be kind of semi-public. And those projects are always really exciting to me. We worked on a project for somebody on Lake of the Isles where he really wanted to put a chessboard down there. And so we built a stone table, stone sitting area, and then sandblasted in a chessboard. And then he puts pieces out there, and he has a little thing that says, please sit down and take some time out of your day and play chess. And so I really like that. I love that kind of, semi-public, a lot of our clients, think that way. They want their front yards to also be experienced and also be viewed and maybe shared in that public sphere. They're kind of giving that to the community at large. So I think in urban small spaces we get that opportunity a lot. And then the last one I think about is rooftop gardens. This one, more and more, we actually use inspiration pictures with our clients of rooftop gardens. A lot of our clients, particularly kind of millennials, they might have lived in North Loop or some other kind of condo community, and then they're moving to South Minneapolis or Highland Park, St. Paul or something as their first house. And a lot of them, they don't want a big yard. To them, a bigness means having to take care of something, and they really just want a space that works for their life. They can have friends over. A lot of them might have little kids, and so the kids can play and they can sit and enjoy kind of their after work time or their weekend. They don't want to spend 3 hours, on the weekend cleaning up leaves or mowing the lawn or whatever. And so rooftops, they've already kind of thought of because they like living in the condo and kind of that. And we always say that they're really looking for a house that acts like a condo. We just worked on one in South Minneapolis that the front, there is no side yard or backyard, and the front is probably 20 feet by 30. And so it's essentially a rooftop. And so we look at, doing decks and doing little separation, planters and things like that feel like a rooftop. Really fun projects to work on. Really lend themselves to SketchUp and doing 3D design too, because you kind of work out the details and the pergolas and things like that. So that one definitely you see a lot of Pinterest inspiration out there for that type of garden. So if you think about kind of what is a small space, what's important about it, how is it different from a large space? One thing that I just kind of think about, it kind of hit me this year, is went into a project in Golden Valley, and it's kind of a nice size, kind of suburban kind of front yard, and then I walk around the side and you just can't believe you walk around the corner of the house and there's this lawn that rolls for like 350, 400 feet to Sweeney Lake. Sweeney Lake is in the distance, and then on the other side of the lake there's no house or anything. It's just trees and shoreline and things like that. You just got this feeling. You got like, this is amazing. Like, I've never seen such an amazing place. And then to kind of counter that in terms of how what is that first feeling you have as a designer when you walk into a space? There's kind of this more typical space, backyard. It's just kind of torn up and junky. It might be 30 feet by 10 or 20 or something like that. And then that to me is always really inspiring. It's just like, oh my gosh, we could do so much with this. And I just kind of think about it, well, what are my different kind of feelings of those two spaces and the feeling of possibility? Which one has more possibility? And I think, the bigger space, naturally kind of think, well, it's a lot bigger, it must have more possibility. But what I find, and maybe this has to do with our practice a little bit, but I talk to people that work on bigger spaces, and they say it kind of is true too, is that when you work on a bigger space, you end up working on the hardscape stuff the pool, you're working on these things to fill space, but you still end up with all this other space that isn't filled, and it ends up being what I'm going to call is this kind of filler or smothering. The reason why we have so much lawn and so much just kind of really boring or simplistic, landscaping, rock mulch and things like that, is because people want to smother the life. They know that if they don't do something like that, it's going to start growing, and that means that they're going to have to take care of it, and whatever. And so, so a lot of it ends up you're working on some of these spaces just right next to the house and whatever, but you don't ever get to those other things. And a lot of those projects, like that one on Sweeney Lake, the first part of that project, putting in the front walk and a little sidewalk and some just basic landscape in the front, we're already at $35,000. Once we get to the back and the back patio and the fire pit area, that's probably gonna be another 50 or something like that. You're already at 85,000. A lot of times what happens is that, the idea, the general concept of that is to do kind of a rolling kind of meadow prairie, kind of look, and some banks of maybe some edible like raspberries and stuff like that. But the reality is that a lot of times you don't get to it. And for me as a plant person, and I think that's kind of part of the life that we're kind of giving in landscapes, is to not be able to get to that is really kind of depressing to me. Whereas these small landscapes, we get to everything. We get to that back corner, we get to the front, the front boulevard, and we get it to fully, and when you get it to fully, well, now I'm not relying on kind of these filler things like just grass that just has to be mowed just because I have too much space. We're filling with cool stuff, and so in small spaces, we're doing little pockets of very dynamic plantings that a lot of times in big spaces we don't really even get to. And so I think that when we started, you kind of have this, natural and small spaces. I think there's a book by Noel Kingsbury from England called like Natural Landscaping in Small Spaces or something like that. And it's like, well, that doesn't really make sense. How can it be both natural and small? I actually think now is that small spaces are kind of made for natural, because natural is going to take a little bit more touch by the client, not necessarily more time, but just a little bit more kind of touch. And there's spaces that you want to be close to their life so that they can kind of enjoy that kind of dynamic. And so I think I can make more dynamic plantings and more kind of natural plantings in a small space. And you kind of see that in some of our projects. One thing, going back to kind of small versus large, Sarah Suzanka wrote the book in the 90s on the not so big house, and I really do think that what we're doing is kind of the not so big landscape. What she was responding to is kind of these McMansions that are being built, and size was the only thing. It wasn't detail. It wasn't kind of matching it to people's lives, and that she could, by making it smaller, kind of bring detail that we really love, that kind of feels right to our life. Just something that we kind of are responding to too, is that big landscapes, hard to kind of get kind of those life details. In small landscapes, I feel like we can get that, and kind of those sparks of joy, which kind of leads to another book that I think is kind of interesting thing about small spaces, which is The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. A book that's been massively popular, which is very kind of interesting. We think about America as like this loving of large, big, whatever. And this book is all about the opposite of that. And the book is really about, if you want to organize your life, 90% of it, get rid of a lot of junk. And the second is get down to those things that you really love, which she calls sparks of joy. When we have a manageable life that has sparks of joy, we feel more in balance. And again, I think that's really what we're looking to do in our designs, is give them just enough around kind of the life that they live, not these extraneous things that they still have to be responsible for, but that don't kind of add this kind of spark of joy. And so I hope that that's kind of what we're kind of giving in our projects. One thing I've been kind of thinking about is that with our body health, you know, we live in this body for whatever, decades, and a lot of we still don't really know what goes on and what, you know, causes, you know, us to be sick, what causes us to be healthy, you know. But I think in the future, I mean, we're starting to see this as kind of these dashboards of metrics that kind of show us what's going on. And like iPhone has this body health dashboard, which you can just kind of see, oh, you know. And right now it's kind of basic. I see my heart rate, I can see how much I slept, you know, with Fitbit and stuff like that. But I think as we kind of get more and more sophisticated, we might see how our populations of, you know, of our, you know, little things going on in our body, and kind of be able to really quickly correlate, like, oh, well, this is what I need to change. But I think a lot of times then what limits our body health is our ability to see what affects the body health, and if we kind of could see that, you know, in real time, we could make those little adjustments and be healthier. I think the same thing is kind of interestingly true of landscapes, is that we're creating really unhealthy landscapes, is that when we're just putting lawn, filling it with lawn, we're really trying to kill off the life, because lawn doesn't have a lot of life. There's just, you know, the root mass is only this deep. There isn't a lot of soil diversity. We're not actually increasing the soil complexity. And the same thing is when we use like rock mulch and stuff, we're just trying to kill off what's there. And if we were able to maybe see that, you know, a little bit more, well, what's the landscape health, you know, right now? And we saw, well, my health is at 5, and then, you know, my neighbor's is at 500 or whatever. Like, I think we might be able to kind of think about, oh, I would like that. And some of the choices then might be dictated by, well, what's my responsibility to make my landscape healthy, rather than just, you know, for my own sake, that I just need it to look neat for my neighbors. And I think that all has to do with complexity of planting, because more complex plantings we have, the more diversity of insects we're going to have, the more diversity of soil organisms there's going to be. You're going to have things rooting deep, some are rooting, you know, a little higher up. And I think if you looked at the dashboard, it'd be like, you know, this is great, you know, this is health. And that's what, you know, I think that we're looking as, you know, owners, the people that are responsible for these patches of the world. We want to leave it in the best way possible. And I think that, something like that could kind of help give us a little better perspective. And then I think that, you know, I kind of came up with this, is that in our lives we kind of have, well, I can manage this. Well, okay, maybe I can manage, you know, a little bit more. But I think so many times, both in space and in complexity of our life, we're just out here. We're beyond what we can really feel good about managing. I think that's in our spaces too, in our yards, is that, you know, there's no way I'm managing that, you know, all that. And so we might pay somebody who's cheap enough to, you know, just zip it down and just round the shrubs off, or, you know, whatever. But I think in a small space we can bring it down to, I feel good about every part of that I'm managing, and I'm living in every part of that. There's not parts of it that I never go to, that front corner with the big rock and whatever. So that's kind of what the things that we think are some of the opportunities in small landscapes, is that I think they're healthy, can be healthy because they're complex, diverse. And then I think that it leads to healthy clients because there's less burden on their life, and kind of less just kind of the extraneous parts of their land that they're managing, and also bringing these kind of sparks of joy. So here's a couple projects that we worked on. This one is in South Minneapolis, small yard. Worked on the backyard first, and one of my favorite projects, put in a bluestone patio. Then we use gravel areas a lot, and we plant right in the gravel. But this was a project we were able to touch the whole backyard. She was able to bring in tons of sparks of joy. She's a really creative person, so we were kind of able to give her the canvas for that. But even like this back area, which kind of be a hard, you know, one to figure out, but you know, their bulldog uses that for going potty. So but it's perfect. I love those things that, you know, there's 6 different uses going on in this really small space. You know, with dogs, sometimes we've created little 6x4 turf areas or something, which are easy to clean up. And that kind of, okay, this is the vegetable area, this is the potting area, this is the dog area, this is the living area. That's always like one of the really satisfying things when we're designing, and when you can come back and you see that they're living it and they're just loving it and having people over. Another one, this is a 4-story brownstone. This was a project that our client actually gave to the association. So small area was just totally kind of abandoned before, which is always satisfying. I always love those before and afters. The before is really bad. But it's a really, really cool opportunity. It's a common space. It's right next to the parking lot. So one of the design challenges, how do we separate from the 12 cars that are in the parking lot? Also needed to be, we needed to be able to actually be able to plow snow into the space. So that was kind of unique, is that how do we close off the space enough so it feels secluded and nice from the parking lot in the summer, but open enough that they could plow onto it in the winter. And so we came up with this solution, which utilizes planters creating that separation, and the 2 middle planters can be moved in the winter so they can plow onto it. Really cool space. Actually looks best at night, and that's actually probably when they use it the most. It's lit up, it has a landscape lighting, and it's just kind of really peaceful and nice at night. It just kind of has a little bit of everything going on. It has a permeable patio, so water goes down. They had, before we got there, they had to separate from the storm water system. And so they had created an 8x12x8 French drain right in the middle. So it's all just gravel, and it takes all the water from the building. But then we just built the patio right on top of that. And so the water and the snow, when they pile snow there, it just goes down into the French drain. So a really cool solution. But this one's kind of like that Amsterdam kind of thought, is that this is a very communal space used by different groups of people, and it brings people together. I mean, otherwise they don't have any space to kind of sit and talk to each other. Everybody's just always going up into their building, and so it's really become that for that group. So that's about it. Actually, the last one, it will be one more. It's called the High Point Center for Printmaking, project we probably did 7 years ago, something like that. This was, so the Center for Printmaking is an area that they have local artists that use it to do printmaking. They have national artists that come and do stints there. And then they also use it for education. And so they have kids that come in and do printmaking, like elementary school kids. So they've done this great garden, this little garden that's it's kind of based on a Japanese design, but it's all native plants, or mostly native plants. So it kind of is a gravel area, and then native plants, and you just can't believe how much life there is going on there. This thing is bursting with life. When we first put it in, there's a rock with a little area kind of cut out of it for water to collect, and a duck came and sat there and was there for like 3 weeks. And then like birds came and they just like lined the edge of the building, kind of sitting there and kind of waiting. It's like, all right, when are you gonna get done? This is a really rewarding garden. It is rain gardens, both in the main kind of garden and along the parking lot, all also planted with native plants. And then what's really cool is that the kids use this garden. They'll come out and do cuttings and bring it into the center, and they'll do prints from the cuttings. But then they also do a whole kind of ecological thing on rain gardens, and I do talks there, just kind of going over like what kind of happens in a garden. We actually have been kind of doing these little sessions on the garden with us, what would happen if you didn't do anything, in this space, like what would happen. And they're so intuitive. I mean, it's like, well, is there any indications around here of what might happen? And, somebody will always kind of notice these piles of elm seeds that are kind of gathering. Like, I bet there'd be trees. And then we kind of like, yeah, well, where are those coming from? And they kind of look around and we see this bank of elms, and we kind of just start to tie together kind of what's the energy of the space and what would happen there. So, so many good things happening with small spaces. And so, no idea how to end this, but.
That's great. Well, that was awesome.